Hello, all you wonderful humans, and Happy New Year! It is so wonderful to see you. I am excited to do some video lessons for you and continue working with you this semester. Thank you for your hard work first semester. So let's get going. Today's lesson is called Good Readers Are Thinking While They Read. And I know you're going to say, well, yeah, Mrs. Roberts, that's not new. But I think one thing we can work on to grow as readers and writers is to be aware of our thinking process. This is called metacognitive process. That really means thinking about your thinking. Now, if you look on the screen, you'll see all the things that could be happening in your mind when you are reading. It is a lot. The goal is that little circle in the center making meaning from the text. But in order to do that, you have to do all these things. You have to understand the words of the text, the language, the features, the author's purpose. You have to know who you are as a reader and connect to your prior learning. You have to know things about text and layout and space. You need to know reading strategies, and that is precisely what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do that with some practice on a short text. But first, we're going to go through some strategies together. Now, you do not need to write them down because I've also sent an image that has them all already printed, but I do want to talk through them for you before we start using them, just so you're totally clear about what I mean, because we are going to practice with them today and probably in your next session as well. So we're going to skip a couple slides here because these ones aren't important to us. But one thing we can do as readers and writers is to make sure we are using metacognitive strategies. Now, you might not know what any are, and that's fine. That's what we're going to talk about today. You might actually know some, but maybe don't have a title or a label for them, which we're also going to talk about. So after today, you should have some labels for specific strategies as well as sentence frames to use as you are reading or writing. So one of these can be planning and goal setting. This we would typically do at the beginning of our reading, right? My purpose is, my top priority is, I will accomplish this goal by. So this might connect specifically if when you are reading something for your self-paced lessons and you know, let's say the topic is theme, you can remind yourself that your purpose in reading this particular piece today is to look at theme. I know that seems silly, right, to have that thought, but what we're doing here is training our brain to think as readers. So the next one that we'll look at is tapping into prior knowledge. Now, I'm just taking you through these right now, but when I show you in a few minutes how to use them, they don't go in any particular order. You might pull any one at any given point. So just because first we started with the one we just did and now we're just tapping prior knowledge, doesn't mean you have to go in that order. These are just, again, a list of strategies you can use. So if I'm tapping into prior knowledge as I'm reading, I'm going to think about connections that I can make. Now, sometimes the reality of our brains is that those connections or personal experiences may have nothing to do with the text at hand, but that doesn't mean there isn't value in building that connection. The more connections you build in your brain and neurons and synapses and all those science words that I have not studied, the more you do that, the more likely you are to hold on to the information as well as truly understand it. So it's always good to make those connections. We just don't want to get stuck there, especially if it's not connected to the text at hand. So our next strategy is making predictions. This is a great element of reading, thinking as you're reading about what you think is going to happen next. And it's even better if you can base that on something you've just read. So because the character said XYZ, I think this will happen next. It's always good to have predictions in your mind about what's going to happen in the reading. It can be fun when you get it correct. It can be surprising when it's different than you did expect. But this is another great strategy to use. Next is visualizing. Now, a lot of people say that this is particularly strong in fiction text, but I also see value in nonfiction text of being able to visualize, especially in scientific texts that are referencing something like living or DNA or all of that. Being able to hold a picture and create a picture in your mind and visualize what you're reading, again, builds those connections for you as a reader and allows you to understand and make meaning of the text. Remember that very first picture I showed? Everything goes back to making meaning of the text. Next, we have revising meaning. Now, this is a really important strategy as a reader that I think we don't talk about enough, and that is, how have you changed your thought because you have read? There have been a lot of stories or articles that I've read where I expected a certain outcome. Maybe I made a prediction, and then I was proven wrong. And I had to think about how I was proven wrong, or why I was proven wrong, or what is showing me something new. What is changing my thinking? It is always okay to change your thinking, to get a new idea based on information. And we have making connections. So this is similar to one that we saw for prior knowledge, but I see the purpose of making connections within the field. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if I'm reading a social studies text, I want to make connections to social studies elements. Or if I'm reading a scientific text, I want to make connections to scientific things. So this is a little bit different than your prior knowledge, because your prior knowledge can kind of go everywhere. But to me, the making connections section is more, how can I connect to other elements in this discipline? Stopping and summarizing as you go is a really important skill, especially in longer passages, because sometimes by the time we get to the end, we've already forgotten what happens at the beginning or how this led to something. So it's really important to know what has happened throughout. So just stopping yourself here and there to summarize and say, okay, what has happened so far, just to remind yourself. Very important strategy, because again, it's going to build that ability for you to make meaning from a text. Asking questions is probably a strategy you're familiar with. So if you have annotated text before, you may have done this in the margins or written on the sides of your text, but always questioning, even if it's just something like, I wonder why the character said that, or why did the author want to do this here? These types of questions are what are activating those networks of knowledge in your brain. So we never just want to read and not ask ourselves questions about what we're reading. Forming interpretations is kind of the next step in that, and that is that I'm taking what I'm reading, I'm asking questions, and I'm making a meaning. This is what it means to me. This is the information I'm taking away. This is what I think the author wanted me to learn. One thing we always have to remember is nothing in a text is random. An author never just randomly did something. The author made a decision every single time. So we have to remind ourselves of that in making our interpretation. Why did the author make this decision? Why did the author make this decision? Evaluating is the next step here. And that is thinking about your opinion or the most important message or what is coming out of this text. It's okay to not like text. And honestly, not having everybody love a specific text or enjoy a specific text is what makes literature so amazing. I can read something and love it, and you can read something and hate it. And it could be for the exact same reasons. And having that conversation about it is really what brings the beauty to literature. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean you have nothing to say about it. I would love to know why you don't like it. All of that is very important. Adopting an alignment is kind of a strange one. Sometimes it's going to be about identifying a character. You'll see in this picture here that they chose Harry Potter to represent that. So I always think of adopting alignment like where you find your house, right? Like I am a Ravenclaw and my kids are Hufflepuffs. My son likes to say he's a Gryffindor. Hey, Evelyn! Hey, Uncle! Okay. But really, like, thinking about how you fit in to the story, or who you see yourself aligning with, or maybe who you see yourself not aligning with. So in the example of Harry Potter, thinking about some of the characters like Draco Malfoy or Severus Snape, like, why don't you align with them? What do they do that you don't like? All of that, again, just helps make your meaning of the text. Analyzing the author's craft is what I was talking about earlier when I said author's choices, right? So the author is always making choices, and it is not random. So analyzing those choices, why did they do this? What made this stand out? Thinking about their specific language decisions. Why did they use this word? Why did they use that sentence? Why did they have a really long sentence and then a short sentence? All of that goes into analyzing author's craft. Monitoring is a really important skill for readers too, to be able to think about, oh, I'm lost. I need to stop. I need to go back and reread. Monitoring is really only something you can do for yourself. I can tell you, at this point, you should go back and reread, but that's not going to give you the sense of where you're at. So you have to be aware in your reading to say, I've gotten lost. I need to reread this part to make sure I'm understanding. Clarifying is, again, kind of like the monitoring, but stopping and trying to figure it out for you. So maybe it's a word and you need to look at your context clues in order to figure out the meaning of the word. Maybe you need to go back and read a different paragraph because you're still not understanding the connection that just happened. There's a lot of different things that can happen, but really this is built on that monitoring and being able to solve that for yourself. How can you make meaning of it? Reflecting and relating, thinking about the big idea. This tends to happen when we're done. So we finished reading and we're thinking about the so what element of it. All of these things are comprehension strategies that, again, go back to making meaning from a text. So for the second part of this lesson today, we're going to practice with that, with the text that I sent to Stolen Party. I'm going to model what it looks like on the first page. And then from there, well, I'll tell you in the next